It was just after I woke up that I heard a voice that turned my entire world upside down. It made me rethink everything, my life, my future, and the person I had become. That voice took me from being a laid-back, easygoing guy to someone who was angry and resentful. At least, that's how it might seem to some. But let me rewind a bit and explain. The name's Ethan Carter, well, Ethan Edward Carter, to be exact. I'm 34 years old, stand 6 feet tall, and tip the scales at around 185 pounds. Pretty average looking, I guess. I'm no Hollywood heartthrob, but I wouldn't say I'm unattractive either. I keep myself in decent shape by running and hitting the gym regularly. By day, I work as a regional manager for my company, based out of Southeast Texas. My name is a blend of my grandfather's names, Ethan Carter and Edward Turner. I'm married to Julia Blackwell. She's 32, 5'7", and in my eyes, the most stunning woman to walk this earth. Julia was the love of my life, or at least, I thought she was until that night. That night changed everything. Julia isn't just beautiful, she's the kind of woman you'd expect to see gracing a movie screen. With her graceful, slender figure and that heart-shaped silhouette, she turns heads wherever she goes. But for me, it's always been her legs. Long, elegant, timeless. They remind me of those classic pin-up models, like Marilyn Monroe. When I see her, there's this air of Grace Kelly's sophistication that just takes my breath away. That's my Julia, or so I thought. But then that voice, her voice, shattered everything I believed about us. It happened late one night. I heard her mumble words that cut deep, words that broke my heart and destroyed what had been a strong, 9-year marriage. She said, "But baby, I can't. Ethan's trip got cancelled, and he'll be home the whole time." After that, sleep became a distant memory. I tossed and turned until nearly 5:30 in the morning before I finally managed to drift off. The day before, I had to cancel my business trip to Miami for a corporate meeting because of issues with some board members and directors at our parent company. That change of plans would haunt me more than I ever imagined. Before the endless night ended, I caught 2 more fragments of her murmured words. "Philip, I'll let you know when," followed later by, "Of course I love you, baby, no one but you." Each word was like a dagger, twisting deeper into my chest. When the alarm blared at 7 a.m., I felt like I'd barely slept. I'd gone to bed around 11, woken up at 3:30 a.m., and those restless hours in between left me feeling hollow. Despite everything, Julia didn't act any differently that morning. We went about our usual routine, showering, getting dressed, having breakfast, and then headed out to work like nothing had happened. Julia worked for an ad agency in West Houston, while I managed operations at a manufacturing plant in North Houston. We lived in a quiet suburb near Houston called Woodbury, not far from downtown. My parents settled there after my dad retired from the army, buying 45 acres of farmland. Over the years, the land was surrounded by suburban developments, but it still held a sense of home for me. That morning at work, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. So, I picked up the phone and called Carla Moore, an old friend who ran Moore & Sons Investigations. Carla and I had been inseparable growing up. Our dads were both in the military, stationed together during our childhood. If anyone could help me uncover the truth, it was Carla. Carla and I had been inseparable for most of our lives. From the time we were 9 until we graduated high school, we grew up together here in the Houston area. Her dad, John, bought 12 acres just half a mile down the county road from where we lived. From 6th grade on, we were in the same schools, and when the time came, we enlisted in the Air Force together. She became a police investigator, and I worked as an avionics technician. While serving, we both took advantage of our downtime to start college. I ended up earning 2 bachelor's degrees, one in electrical engineering and the other in business management. Carla followed a similar path, earning degrees in criminal justice and law enforcement. After we left the Air Force, we wrapped up our education as 5th-year seniors at the University of Texas in San Antonio, just west of Houston. Once she graduated, Carla began her career as a police officer in Sugar Land before moving up to investigator with the Houston Police Department. But when budget cuts came through, she decided to strike out on her own. Her reputation, her connections with law enforcement, and her excellent track record made her a go-to for local district attorneys, police departments, and even private lawyers across the area. I, on the other hand, found a job with a growing manufacturing company. They specialized in creating all kinds of products out of foam and plastic. The company had started small, but by the time I joined, their manufacturing operations had grown to include 4 buildings spanning nearly 10,000 square feet, with offices in a separate building on the same site. Over the years, I kept up with my education and earned a master's degree in manufacturing engineering. Carla's investigative firm, Moore & Sons, had grown, too. It now included her husband, Greg, her cousin James, and her younger sister Emily. They had expanded so much that their offices occupied the entire 3rd floor of a prominent bank building in West Houston. I knew they had other staff working for them as well, but Carla was still the driving force behind it all. That morning, after everything that had happened the night before, I called Carla as soon as I got to my office. I didn't waste any time and explained what I had overheard. "Ethan, I'm so sorry to hear that," she said, her voice filled with genuine concern. "I always thought you two had an amazing marriage. What do you want me to do?" "Carla," I said, trying to stay composed, "is there such a thing as a voice recorder that can run for, say, 10 hours straight?" She didn't miss a beat. "Actually, we just got one in that records to a flash drive. It can run for up to 12 hours, either continuously or with sound activation. It can even wirelessly download to a computer if it's within 100 yards. Is that what you need for the bedroom?" "That's perfect," I replied. "But I also want the whole house wired for sound and video. I need to know if anything's going on. Oh, and there's something else. I think there's a new guy at Julia's office. He started sometime last year, maybe around the holidays. I'm pretty sure his name is Philip, though I didn't think much of it at the time." "Don't worry, Ethan," she reassured me. "We'll take care of everything. I'll have someone stop by for a key and the alarm code today so we can get your house set up. The recorder will be installed in your bedroom and configured to download directly to your laptop. You'll just need to turn it on before she goes to bed and off after you wake up in the morning. Once you get the recordings, send them to me. But listen, for your own sanity, don't play them back yourself. Let me handle it for you." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Thanks, Carla. I really appreciate it. And don't worry about the cost," she added. "It won't be free, but for you, it won't break the bank either. I still owe you for saving my life, Carla. Let me worry about this, okay? You just keep doing what you do best, and I'll leave finding out the truth about Julia to you. Ethan, you have no idea how good that makes me feel, to know someone is truly in my corner," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't think I could survive this if it turns out to be true." "Don't stress too much yet," she replied reassuringly. "You've got plenty of friends who'll stand by you no matter what happens. We'll figure this out together. I'll send Angie over to grab the key and the code. You remember her, right? That way, we can get everything set up without a hitch. Just hang in there, Ethan. Treat this like a bad dream for now. We'll help you through it." "Thanks, Carla. I appreciate it more than I can say. I'll expect Angie this afternoon. See you soon." "See you soon, Ethan," she said before hanging up. Now, about saving Carla's life, that's not the kind of story where I pulled her from a burning building or kept her from drowning. No, this was a different kind of rescue, one that was more mental than physical. Back in high school, Carla had started dating Amanda Benson. They were getting pretty serious, and I could see Carla falling hard for her. Amanda was gorgeous, no doubt about it, but she also came with some serious baggage. We didn't know it at the time, but Amanda was not only bipolar but also dangerously unstable, borderline homicidal. In school, though, she seemed like the perfect catch. She was popular, funny, and full of life. Carla thought she'd struck gold when she asked Amanda out, and from all appearances, their dates seemed to go great. At least, that's what Carla thought. But then I heard from Lauren King, Amanda's cousin, that things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Amanda's mom had disappeared from the picture years earlier, institutionalized in some faraway mental hospital under mysterious circumstances. Nobody in the family liked to talk about it. The same thing had happened to Amanda's grandmother and her great-grandmother. Lauren shared that the doctors suspected it was hereditary, with each generation showing symptoms earlier and earlier. Amanda's great-grandmother was diagnosed in her 40s, her grandmother in her early 30s, and her mother started struggling as young as 25. That put Amanda in a risky spot. Once I heard this, I knew I had to tell Carla to keep an eye on Amanda. For most of our junior year and into senior year, things seemed fine. Everything went smoothly, even through the lead up to prom. That night at the dance, we were all having a blast, laughing, dancing, and enjoying ourselves. But as the night wound down, things took a sharp turn into chaos. Amanda came back from the bathroom acting strange, like something had snapped. As we stepped outside, she turned on Carla, her eyes blazing with fury, and accused her of cheating with the Johnson twins. Now Kayla and Kristen Johnson were undeniably two of the hottest girls in school. Most guys thought they were way out of reach, and even if you got close, they were known to be massive teases and pranksters. But Amanda wasn't joking. Her voice was sharp, her tone accusatory, and her anger was escalating fast. Apparently, in the bathroom, the Johnson twins had been bragging about all the nights they'd supposedly spent with Carla, dropping comments about how incredible she was in bed. Amanda stormed out of there like a woman possessed, confronting Carla right there in the parking lot. She started yelling, shoving, and slapping at her. And then, something inside her snapped. Imagine the chaos of Carrie at prom mixed with the fiery rage of Charlie from Firestarter, and you might get a sense of what Amanda turned into. Toss in a bit of Cujo's rabid frenzy, too, because before long, she wasn't just angry, she was unhinged. I sent my date, Sherry Rivers, running back inside the hotel to call the cops while I tried to step in and stop Amanda myself. But she wasn't having it. She turned on me like a wild animal. Before I could even get close, she'd already battered Carla nearly senseless using her purse, her fists, her feet, and anything else she could grab. Finally, I managed to get behind her, grabbing her arms at the elbows and lifting her off the ground. That's when backup arrived, 2 male teacher chaperones and the hotel security guard. The security guy handcuffed Amanda's wrists behind her back, and we both worked to keep her from lashing out at everyone else. Amanda was still thrashing, kicking, and even trying to bite the security guard. I had no choice. I drew back and shoved her in the jaw. That was it. She went limp, unconscious in an instant. By the time the police arrived, Amanda had woken up and was acting sweet as pie, like none of it had even happened. But they weren't taking any chances. They handled her politely, but you could see they kept their distance. She never returned to school after that night. A few days later, I got the full story from Lauren. Amanda had been sent to the same facility where her mother was institutionalized, and her father had moved away to deal with the fallout. That was my so-called heroic save of Carla Moore, not exactly textbook, but it kept her from being seriously hurt that night. A few minutes after finishing my call with Carla, my ever-reliable PA, Rachel Bennett, stepped into my office. "Ethan, you look like hell," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "What happened?" "Nothing much," I replied, forcing a smile. "I woke up in the middle of the night, and just couldn't get back to sleep. By the way, I'm expecting a visitor this afternoon, Emily Moore. She's a family friend. When she gets here, please send her straight in. And Rachel, thanks for noticing. Sorry if my appearance startled you." "Of course, Ethan," she said with a nod. "And should I get you some coffee or anything to help you power through?" "No, I'm fine. But could you do me a favor and get Andrew Hayes on the line for me? I need to discuss something that's come up recently." "Thanks, Rachel." Rachel, though I often call her Logan now, has been my right hand through my last 2 promotions. She started as my secretary and worked her way up to being my personal assistant. Honestly, I can't imagine running things half as smoothly without her by my side. "I'll get Mr. Hayes on the phone as soon as I can," Rachel assured me. "But seriously, are you sure you're okay? You look more than just tired, like you've lost your best friend." "It's okay, Logan," I said, trying to sound more convincing than I felt. "I'll be fine. Don't worry about me." Once Rachel left and gently closed the door behind her, I lost it. Yeah, I know, big tough guys like me aren't supposed to cry. But sitting there, hunched over my desk, it all came pouring out. Silent, gut-wrenching sobs that shook me to my core. It felt like someone had reached into my chest, ripped out my heart while it was still beating, and smashed it into a million broken pieces scattered across the ground. What had I done wrong? Was it something I said? Was I not enough for Julia, in bed, in life, or in love? Had I driven her to this? Why wasn't I enough for her? These thoughts swirled endlessly, pulling me deeper into a pit of despair. Then the intercom buzzed, snapping me out of it. Rachel's calm, professional voice came through. "Ethan, Mr. Hayes is online too, and Miss Carla Moore called to say she'll be here in 30 minutes. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and picked up the phone. "Andrew, how are you doing today?" I asked, trying to sound composed. "More to the point, Ethan, how are you doing?" he replied, his voice tinged with concern. "Rachel mentioned you didn't sleep well, and then I get a call like this from you. What's going on? Is everything okay at home?" "Andrew, we've known each other too long for me to beat around the bush," I said, sighing heavily. "I think my marriage is falling apart. Last night, I heard Julia talking in her sleep about some guy named Philip. She said she loved him and mentioned something about not being able to do something because my out-of-town trip got cancelled. I've already got Carla Moore on board. She's setting up surveillance, sound and video in the house and on Julia's phone, to find out what's really going on. She's also sending someone to shadow Julia and see what she's up to." There was silence on the line for a moment before Andrew spoke. "I'm sorry to hear that, Ethan. That's tough. But let's get practical. What do you need from me right now?" "I need you to start drawing up the paperwork for a divorce," I said bluntly. "I'll get you all the financial information. You know the property's still in my dad's name. It has been since before the marriage. What else do I need to do? Oh, and let me send you some money for your retainer." "Ethan," Andrew Hayes said kindly, "right now you can retain me for $1. We'll sort out the rest later. How about we meet for lunch? I've got a checklist of things you'll need to do if this is real. And even if it's not, there are steps we can take now to protect you. But tell me, who handles the finances in your household? You or Julia?" "Julia and I decided early on to keep our money separate," I explained. "We each contribute enough of our paychecks to a shared household account to cover the bills, plus a little extra for unexpected expenses. Then we keep the rest in our own personal savings accounts. I manage the bills online from the household account, and at the end of every 6 months, we split any surplus. Half goes into our IRAs, and the other half goes into the college fund for our future kids." "All right," Andrew Hayes said thoughtfully. "That's a good system. For now, keep a close eye on the household account, just in case. We'll discuss more when we meet. Hang in there, Ethan. We'll get through this." "Thanks, Andrew Hayes," I said, feeling a flicker of relief. "I'll see you at lunch." "Is that really important?" I asked. "I mean, does it matter if I know what Julia makes at work?" "It can be," Andrew Hayes replied. "Do you know what she earns?" "Not exactly. I've seen a few of her paycheck stubs in the desk drawer, but since we both contribute to the household account, it's never been an issue. I think I make more than she does, but I couldn't say by how much." "How much does each of you contribute to the household account?" "Well, I put in $2,800 and some change twice a month, and Julia adds another $1,900 every 2 weeks. Altogether, that's just over $10,000 a month. Our bills run about $7,600, so there's always some extra for unexpected expenses or incidentals." "Good," Andrew Hayes said. "If you can, get a copy of her latest paycheck stub along with yours. Write up a list of your household expenses too, and we'll go from there. Actually, the way you two manage your finances works in your favor, since she doesn't know what you make. If we find out what she earns, we'll have a clearer picture for the next steps. Can you meet me at the Roadhouse Grill up in Spring tomorrow at 1 p.m.? Bring that information with you. I'll coordinate with Carla and add her findings to the case. We'll figure this out together." "Thanks, Andrew Hayes," I said, my voice heavy with emotion. I don't know what I did to make this happen." "Ethan, don't do that to yourself," he said firmly. "Knowing you, you didn't do anything wrong. This isn't your fault. Julia made her choices. Don't let guilt eat you alive, you're not the bad guy here. She is." By the time Andrew Hayes and I finished talking, I felt slightly more grounded. After hanging up, my intercom buzzed again. Rachel's calm voice announced, "Miss Moore is here. Send her in, Logan." "Thanks." When the door opened, I wasn't prepared for the sight that greeted me. Standing there was someone I barely recognized, someone who made Julia look like she was wearing a burlap sack. Emily Moore wasn't the gangly tomboy I remembered. She was now an absolutely stunning woman, probably about 5 feet 3 inches and maybe 110 pounds soaking wet in a jacket. Her figure was the kind you'd see in old Hollywood movies, an hourglass silhouette, perfectly proportioned in every way. Her light brown hair had natural sun-kissed streaks, or maybe she'd added them deliberately. Either way, it framed her face beautifully. Her eyes were a glistening light green, just shy of emerald, and her smile, oh, her smile. It wasn't just warm, it was blinding, the kind that could light up a whole room. For a moment, I just stood there, speechless, as the memory of the pigtailed tomboy who used to tag along with Carla collided with the vision in front of me. I finally snapped out of it, moving around the desk and reaching out a hand to greet her. Before I could say a word, Emily closed the gap between us, throwing her arms around me in a tight hug. Her embrace was warm and sincere, and I couldn't help but notice how effortlessly she fit against me. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft but filled with excitement. "It's been so long since I've been able to do this." She pulled back slightly, looking up into my eyes. "You do know I had the worst crush on you all through school, right? Then you went away," Emily continued, her voice softening. "And I haven't seen you since Carla's wedding. I'm so sorry about this mess with your wife, but don't worry. We'll figure out the truth, no matter what. You can count on me, we won't leave a single stone unturned." As she unwound herself from the hug, I felt a rush of heat rising in my face. I turned quickly, heading back behind my desk under the pretense of getting comfortable, but really just to hide my very unprofessional reaction to her touch. Motioning for her to sit, I took a moment to compose myself, forcing my brain back to neutral. "Emily, you've certainly changed since Carla's wedding. I barely recognize you from that skinny kid back then. You must have been, 15 or 16 at the time?" "Actually, I was 19, she corrected with a playful smile. "But yeah, I guess I did grow out of being that pesky little sister you all loved to pick on." She gave a little laugh, and her eyes sparkled as she spoke. "Well," she said, snapping back into her professional tone, "Carla called me in because you needed help, so here I am. Let's get right to it. Hand over your key and the security code, and I'll have your place wired for sound and video before you know it. The van's already on its way, and it looks like a run-of-the-mill security company. Your wife won't suspect a thing. Now tell me exactly what you need so we can get this done right." I walked her through the situation, detailing everything I noticed and what I needed set up. Emily nodded intently, absorbing every word like a pro. "Got it," she said confidently. "We'll handle everything. Shouldn't take more than a couple hours. Once it's all set up, I'll swing back to configure your laptop for the recordings." As I handed her the key and the alarm code, she stood up, walked around the desk, and hugged me again. This time, her tone softened, and she said, "Ethan, we'll take care of this for you. Don't worry. We're very discreet, and you'll have the answers you need soon. See you later." With that, she turned and walked out of my office, leaving me with a mix of relief and 1,000 questions swirling in my head. I tried to refocus on work, but my thoughts wouldn't settle. Giving up, I decided to head down to the building's snack bar for lunch. The place was quiet, a nice escape from the chaos inside my head. I grabbed a burger and a Coke and tucked myself into a corner table, one of those spots people use for quiet work or private calls. The middle of August heat was brutal, pushing 105 degrees outside, but in here, at least, it was cool. Lost in thought, I nearly jumped when my cell phone buzzed on the table. The screen flashed Julia. My stomach churned as I debated whether to answer. Ignoring it would raise suspicion, and I couldn't risk tipping her off. I took a deep breath and swiped to answer. "Hi, honey," I said, keeping my tone as even as I could. "Are you going to be home on time tonight?" Julia's voice was sweet, almost too sweet. "I thought I'd fix us a nice dinner, and we could relax out by the pool afterward. Maybe even fool around in the hot tub after it gets dark. I know how much you like that." I clenched my fist under the table, forcing a smile into my voice. "Damn, Julia, that sounds amazing," I said. "But I've got this proposal to finish for the board, and it's going to keep me tied up late tonight." "Rain check?" "They decided to do a video conference tomorrow instead of us flying to Miami next week," I told Julia, keeping my tone as casual as possible. "One of the directors just found out his wife has cancer, and it's really shaken him. That's why the trip got cancelled. Tomorrow's meeting will cover the basics, and then there'll be a bigger gathering later this month. But I'll be working late tonight, probably until around 10:30 or 11. No later than that. Logan and her fiancé would never let me keep her here any longer. They'd both kill me for it. Plus, I need a good night's sleep to be sharp for the conference. Julia sounded disappointed but said, "Okay, Ethan. Maybe this weekend then?" "That sounds good," I replied, holding back the bitterness threatening to surface. "All right," she said softly. "See you at home later." "Bye, baby." We talked for a couple more minutes, but I could feel my control slipping. My anger and despair were barely contained, and I knew it was starting to show. I hung up, realizing too late that I hadn't said my usual love you at the end. Would Julia notice? Did she even care? I didn't have long to dwell on it because Logan appeared at my table in the snack bar, a phone in hand. "You've got a call," she said, but I shook my head and begged off, following her back to the office. As soon as the door closed, Logan spun on her heel and crossed her arms, fire blazing in her eyes. "Ethan Carter," she said, her voice sharp. "Now you tell me what the hell is going on, or I quit. That was your wife on the phone, wasn't it? And don't even try to deny that you were struggling to keep your anger in check. So let me guess, she's screwing around on you, right? Because if you were cheating, well, we'd have already done the deed in this office." The bluntness of her words hit me like a brick. My jaw dropped, but before I could respond, she added, "Don't just sit there. I'm serious. Spill it, Ethan, or I'm out. And don't think for a second I didn't put two and two together. Emily Moore, she's with Moore and Sons Investigations. And Andrew Hayes? He's with Bennett, Johnson and Hayes. This is serious, isn't it?" Logan's glare could have burned through steel. I collapsed into my chair, the weight of it all crushing down on me. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "And maybe tone down the look? If looks could kill, I'd have been 6 feet under 10 minutes ago." She didn't sit but leaned against the desk, her arms still crossed. Her eyes bore into me, and I knew I had no choice. Slowly, I started explaining. I told her what I knew, what I'd overheard, and what I suspected. I laid out the plans I'd already put into motion, detailing Emily's investigation and the legal steps Andrew Hayes was preparing. When I finally finished, I sighed and slumped back in my chair. There you have it. That's everything. So, if you're going to kill me, do it now. I'm ready. I threw my arms out like some defeated gladiator awaiting the final blow. Logan let out a snort, shaking her head. "You old fart," she said, the fire in her eyes dimming. "I couldn't stay mad at you if I tried. But seriously, is there anything I can do to help?" She paused, then smirked. "You do remember that I know Connie Harris over at Gibbons & Associates, right?" I blinked, confused. "That's the ad agency Julia works at." "Who's Connie, and why would she know anything about Julia?" Logan leaned in, a sly grin spreading across her face. "Connie and I go way back, we grew up together. I even introduced her to her husband, Grant. Trust me, if there's something going on at that office, Connie would know. She works in HR there," Logan said with a mischievous grin. "So let me make a call and see what I can find out. Like what Julia's paycheck looks like, if there's a Philip on the staff, and if so, whether she's cozy with him. This way, we can gather intel without anyone snooping around the agency or tipping your cheating wife off." She gave me a wink. "That's who Connie is." I sighed, a mix of relief and frustration. "All right, I guess that works. I'll let Carla know we've got that angle covered. But now, we really need to buckle down. I've been avoiding work all morning, and I've got to catch up if I'm going to deliver a solid presentation tomorrow. You okay staying late for this?" Logan shrugged with a smirk. "Jim and I have an understanding. If I need to work late, he knows it's for good reason. And if he says he's working late, I make sure to join him as soon as I'm done here. I'll be right there, helping him finish up whatever it is. We're a team that way. Plus, he trusts me completely. He knows that even if I wanted to start something with you, you'd shut it down and call him immediately. That's what real trust looks like, and we're not even married yet." She was right, of course. Damn straight I'd call him, I said with a nod. "We have that unspoken pact, remember? The first to know rule. If either of us finds out the other is being two-timed, we tell them immediately. No one wants to be the last to know." Alright, you've convinced me. Can we get some work done now? I wasn't lying to Julia. I really do need to finish this presentation. Logan laughed and pointed to the file on my desk. It's almost done already. I just need to add my finishing touches to make it shine. After that, maybe we can order some supper and have Jim join us for a meal. That's exactly what we did. I handled a couple of production issues that popped up while Logan polished the presentation. Emily swung by later to return my house key and load the surveillance software onto my laptop. She walked me through the basics, how to start and stop the recording, download the files, and email a copy to Carla. Once the workday wrapped up, we ordered Cajun food from the Bayou Grill in West Houston through a service called Dine on Demand. They picked up our order and delivered it hot to the office for a small fee. The three of us, Logan, Jim, and I, enjoyed a fantastic dinner together. Around 9 p.m., Julia called. Hey, when are you coming home? She asked, her voice sweet but tinged with impatience. Just finishing up here, I replied, keeping my tone light. I'll be home soon. See you in a bit. We wrapped up our little dinner party, and everyone headed their separate ways. I drove home, trying to mentally prepare for whatever lay ahead. When I got back home, Julia was wearing a sheer black nightgown that looked stunning on her, and she was all over me. But I played it off, claiming I was too exhausted and just needed to crash. I caught the scent of fresh soap on her, which told me she'd just taken a shower. That was unusual. She normally showers in the morning, so it set off some alarm bells. Before hitting the sack, I started the recorder on my laptop. I also popped 2 sleeping pills, and within 10 minutes, I was out cold, staying that way until the alarm jolted me awake the next morning. Julia headed to the bathroom while I grabbed my laptop. I turned off the recorder and went through my usual morning routine. I mustered up the strength to give Julia a goodbye kiss and then made my way to the office. Once there, I emailed the recording file from overnight to Carla and got on with my day. My presentation went off without a hitch, earning me plenty of praise from both the home office and the board members who attended. There were subtle hints that our director might be moving up to the home office, and they seemed to be quietly scouting for a local replacement. I knew I'd need to talk to Monty Brooks, our director, about my situation. So, I stopped by his office and told him straight up that while I'd love the job if offered, I couldn't accept it until my divorce was finalized. Monty got it completely. His brother had gone through a nasty split with a cheating wife right after a big promotion. Monty said if the home office really needed him, I'd get the job, but the title and salary wouldn't kick in until later. They'd hold the promotion for me, and my year-end bonus would reflect the new role. He also mentioned the home office was impressed with my work and his recommendation that I take over his position. Later, I met Andrew Hayes at the Roadhouse Grill for lunch and handed over everything I had, including what Logan had uncovered through her friend Connie. Things stayed pretty routine for a couple of weeks after that. It was tough keeping things civil with Julia, but the recordings and surveillance Carla's team was running were giving us solid intel. Then, one afternoon just before quitting time, Carla called. She told me they had everything wrapped up and that Andrew Hayes would be swinging by soon with some papers for me to sign. She reminded me to pay Andrew Hayes his $1. I joked. Hell, give him 2, 1 for each of us, and we're even. Carla added. By the way, your wife had a visitor last night. We've got it all on tape, in HD with surround sound. But listen, Ethan, I strongly recommend you don't watch it. She continued. As for your recording from last night, there wasn't much of interest, just some snoring, you rehearsing your presentation, and her stressing about a new work policy on fraternizing with vendors and co-workers in the same division. She might lay low for a bit, but we've already got everything we need. They talked about when it all began, and it sounded like last night might have been the end, at least for now. Man, am I glad we caught this before they decided to call it quits. How long, Carla? How long has this been going on? She sighed. It looks like it started at the company holiday party in December. Then there was the New Year's party, and things escalated from there. Altogether, it's been about 6 or 7 months. I'm really sorry, Ethan. I wish I could have told you there was nothing going on, but well, here we are. Carla tried to lighten the mood. Come by the house soon. We'll grill some steaks, cheer for the Astros, and drink way too much beer. Oh, and Emily says she's glad to see you again. I think her little crush on you just got even bigger. I chuckled weakly. Thanks, Carla. You've been a huge help. Tell Emily she might be seeing more of me, but not for a while. God, I still can't get over how much she's changed since I last saw her at your wedding. But first, I need time to process all this and shake off the feeling that I somehow caused it. I know I didn't, but the doubt, it's still there. I paused before adding. You know, people say you can't just stop loving someone overnight. Turns out they're right. But sometimes the love gets buried under all the pain they've caused you. I thought we had the perfect marriage, that we loved each other more than anything. Then, suddenly, the love's gone, or maybe it's still there, but the respect and trust? Those are gone for good. I sighed deeply. I gotta go, Carla. See you soon. By the time we hung up, Andrew Hayes had arrived. He walked into my office with a briefcase in hand and sat down across from me. Without wasting time, he slid the papers over for me to sign. The judge is waiting on these, he said. When do you want them served? Tomorrow. 10 a.m. At her workplace. I replied firmly. Got it. I'll make sure it's done, Andrew Hayes said as he stood up and hurried out. And just like that, it was out of my hands. I had one more night to endure under the same roof as that lying cheat, and then she could be someone else's problem. As I sat there, I tried to recall those holiday parties. There were moments when Julia wasn't by my side, but I'd usually spot her chatting with coworkers. Now that I thought about it, there were times I couldn't find her, and when she'd reappear, she'd flash me that smile of hers. I remembered the night of the Christmas party. She spilled some wine on her dress and insisted on showering as soon as we got home to get the stain out. She'd been drinking white wine all evening, but now that I replayed it in my mind, that stain looked off. By the time we got home, it had dried into something crusty. And that's when it pushed me. Oh my God! She hadn't spilled wine. She had given someone a kiss below the belt, missed, and a bit had ended up on her dress. How could I have been so blind? I really was a clueless fool. No wonder they kept it going. They probably had a good laugh about it later. Well, either of them would be laughing tomorrow. The divorce papers were ready in two versions, one citing irreconcilable differences and the other for adultery, complete with a suit for alienation of affections against Philip and another suit aimed at her company. If she signed the easy version, we'd keep things simple. But if she refused, we'd go full throttle, and everyone would get dragged into the mess. Since we didn't have kids, the split could be straightforward, 50-50 on assets and money, with no alimony. I'd learned Julia was earning nearly as much as I was, which made things even better. The only wrinkle was the college fund, which we'd need to cash out unless I decided to buy her share of it. Her IRA was probably close to mine, and while I might have more in savings, who could say for sure? The farm wasn't an issue, it was still in my dad's name. We rented it for $500 a month, and he leased the farmland out for additional income. That was untouchable. As for the cars, Julia had her 3-year-old BMW, which we'd bought because she wanted something flashy for going out. My 4-year-old Toyota Tacoma was paid off, and it was the truck I drove every day. Then there was my old 1970 Chevrolet Camaro sitting in the garage. It was in rough shape and needed a full restoration, but I always figured I'd get around to it someday and make it good as new. Looking ahead, I'd been toying with the idea of picking up a 2024 Mustang GT once the 2025 models hit the market. I thought it'd be fun to throw on a supercharger and boost the horsepower from 450 to somewhere around 600 or 700. Then again, with gas prices what they were, I might hold off. Still, it could be just a thing to catch the attention of some decent women. Of course, I'd have to add a Flowmaster exhaust system, something with a low, throaty growl that sounded as good as it looked. I needed to snap out of my daydreaming and muster the courage to head home and lie to my wife for one more night. As I was leaving, Logan pulled me into a hug and said, "Just one more night, and then freedom. See you in the morning?" "Thanks, Logan. Love you too," I replied. "Tell Jim he's got the best woman around here." I got into my truck and drove home, hoping for the best. When I arrived, Julia wasn't back yet. I killed some time in the kitchen, whipping up a nice tuna salad and sticking it in the fridge. Then I changed into shorts and a Hawaiian shirt we'd bought on our honeymoon, poured myself a stiff rum on ice, and settled onto the screened-in back porch overlooking the pool. About an hour later, I heard the front door close and the familiar clack of high heels on the hardwood floor. I'm out on the porch, I called out. I'll be there in a minute. I want to change, she yelled back. I heard the sound of water running upstairs and knew she was showering. Our bathroom was right above the porch. Eventually, she came out wearing short shorts and one of my old t-shirts. Want a drink? I asked. Honey, I'd love one. It's been a killer day, she replied. I went inside, poured myself iced tea in the same small whiskey glass I'd used earlier. It looked identical to my previous drink, and made her a gin and tonic. I added a little more gin than tonic, thinking she'd appreciate it after her killer day. Walking back out into the cool evening breeze from the ceiling fans, I said, I made tuna salad for tonight. Hope that's okay, babe. Oh, Ethan, you know I love your tuna salad almost as much as I love you, she said. I thought to myself, that must mean you hate my tuna salad. Guess now I know where I stand. I handed her the drink, sat down, and stared out at the pool. I prayed for the strength to get through the night without losing my temper or doing something I'd regret. I had no intention of settling for less than I deserved, so keeping any emotional connection was out of the question, for tonight and forever. She sipped her drink slowly, rocking back and forth in the springy chair she adored. We'd seen those chairs at the furniture store years ago, and she insisted we get two for the porch. I preferred my sturdy redwood chair with wide arms and cushioned seating. As the sky turned dusky, I asked, Want me to make you a sandwich, or would you rather have crackers with your tuna? And I see you're ready for a refill. Crackers tonight, she said. But make me a sandwich to take for lunch tomorrow. Okay, honey, no problem. Be right back. I took her glass inside, made her an even stronger drink, and brought it back out to her. I made myself a sandwich with a handful of chips and brought Julia a tray with a bowl of tuna salad and some crackers. After handing her the tray, I went back inside to grab my own plate. When I returned to the porch, I sat down and ate quietly, still not saying much. Once the sky was fully dark, I took her tray and my plate back inside, rinsed them off, and loaded them into the dishwasher. I refilled Julia's drink, this time with almost straight gin, and poured myself more iced tea, making sure it looked like my earlier rum drink. Truth was, I'd only had one drink before she got home, and I'd stuck to iced tea after that. I wanted her good and tipsy tonight so I could survive another miserable evening sitting beside her. The humidity was starting to hang heavy in the air, so we moved inside. I busied myself closing up the house for the night and made sure to turn on the bedroom recorder. I'm beat, I said, heading upstairs. Julia tried to follow, but she was unsteady on her feet. I helped her up the stairs and into the bathroom before going to the other upstairs bathroom to get ready for bed. By the time I climbed under the covers, she had shuffled back into the bedroom. She circled the bed and climbed in, clearly tipsy. I waited until she was settled and then tried to snuggle up to her. Not tonight, baby, she mumbled. I'm not feeling so good. Must have had too much to drink. She made a kissing noise in my direction, rolled over, and turned her back to me. Great. At least I didn't have to deal with her pawing at me all night, as she usually did. When the alarm went off the next morning, Julia groaned and held her head, clearly nursing a hangover. I, on the other hand, felt refreshed and ready to tackle the day. It was Thursday, the best day of the week. Maybe even the best day of the month. Today was the day my cheating wife would be served with divorce papers at work. Tonight, I wouldn't have to lie next to the woman who had shredded my heart, and then had the gall to bring her lover into our home, defiling our bed. A new bed was definitely in my future. Julia dragged herself through her morning routine, showering, applying makeup, and dressing like she was off to impress some client. How did I know what a woman like that dressed like? Well, last year in New York, one of the visiting execs from another subsidiary had hired an escort for a night out. Word was she cost him $4,500 for the evening. I hope she was worth it because the next morning, during our meeting, he was fired and sent home in disgrace. I took my time driving to work that day, whistling a tune I'd heard on the radio earlier. It was a country classic, He Stopped Loving Her Today. Fitting, really? I hadn't taken my love for Julia to the grave, but today was the day I finally stopped loving her. Today truly felt like the first day of the rest of my life. I would celebrate this day forever. How fitting that it fell on Friday the 13th of September 2023. For me, it would forever be Independence Day. I always got chills hearing Bill Pullman deliver that iconic speech in Independence Day, but today, those words resonated on a whole new level. Deep down, I could hear him again. We will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day. Between that speech and the country song I'd heard earlier, something shifted inside me. I realized I could move past this, because, in truth, I already had. I felt nothing for Julia anymore. She no longer had the power to hurt me. Somewhere between the speech and the music, I had left her behind. I was reborn. I could start over. I could be happy that I'd uncovered her betrayal early in my marriage, while I was still young enough to rebuild my life. The future didn't feel bleak anymore, it felt wide open. When I walked into the outer office, Logan looked up and smiled. "Ethan, you look terrific. What happened?" Without thinking, I swept her into my arms, twirled her around the room, and kissed her square on the lips. "Happy Independence Day," I said with a grin, leaving her standing there, stunned and wide-eyed. I strode into my office, leaving the door open, and sat down at my desk. As I powered up my computer, I searched for Bill Pullman's speech. Logan appeared in the doorway, still looking puzzled. "Come in," I said, motioning to the chair in front of my desk. I turned the speakers up and hit play. As the speech filled the room, I felt that familiar chill run down my spine, just like the first time I'd heard it in the theater. Logan sank heavily into the chair, her eyes glued to the screen as the words echoed around us. When the clip ended, I replayed it once more, savoring every word, then shut it down. "Logan," I said, leaning back in my chair, "today is my Independence Day. Independence from my cheating wife. That speech, it's not just about aliens and spaceships. It's about fighting for your life, for your freedom, against impossible odds." I paused, letting the moment settle. That speech, Kennedy's Ask Not What Your Country Can Do For You address, and Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, those are probably the most powerful speeches of all time. And one of them wasn't even delivered by a real president. Funny how that works. Logan nodded, still processing. Most people today don't remember Kennedy's speech, or even Lincoln's, not in detail. But Pullman's speech? That's etched into people's minds. It's a rallying cry, a reminder that we can face anything and come out stronger. And today, it was my rallying cry too. The reason Pullman's speech resonates so much is that it's been spoken to countless people over the years since Independence Day came out in 1996, and in so many languages. It just sticks in your mind. When that movie hit theaters, you were only 8, but I was 16. It struck a chord in me back then, and somehow, it's always stayed with me. This morning, when I heard George Jones sing He Stopped Loving Her Today, it clicked. I was over Julia. That realization led me straight to the Independence Day speech. "So, what do you think?" I asked Logan. "Well, first, I think you're crazy," she said, shaking her head. "How can you go from loving someone so much you die for them to not loving them at all? Secondly, what the hell was that kiss about? And third, are you seriously crazy?" "Nope. I'm just deliriously happy," I replied with a grin. "And there, I've answered your questions. Anything else?" Logan sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Being happy is one thing, but that kiss? That was something else entirely. Even Jim has never given me a gesture that carried as much weight as that one brief moment. I'm sitting here completely flustered, unable to collect myself, and feeling utterly overwhelmed. Part of me is tempted to report this to HR, but I can't seem to move from this spot." That said, she continued, her expression softening, "For future reference, you have to teach Jim that kiss, and I'll love you forever, as a friend and a boss. Now, can we get some work done?" "You bet," I said, laughing. And that's exactly what we did. At 5:50 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was the call I'd been waiting for. They were going to serve Julia in 10 minutes. My heart raced as I waited for the follow-up call I knew was coming. Logan had set it up to transfer directly to me and record it. Independence Day at last, I thought. Now, let's hear Julia's story. Julia's story began to play in my mind as I waited. I guess it all started in college. I imagined her saying, "I was a good student, didn't get caught up in the parties or the fooling around most kids did. I was focused on getting a solid education so I could land a good job." Once I was established and making decent money, then I could have fun. I'd seen what happened to my parents and my older sister. My dad got my mom pregnant with Cindy when she was just 16, and he was 17. He managed to finish high school, but after that, it was straight into the workforce. He was brilliant with his hands, could build anything, and picked up new skills quickly, but without a proper education, he was stuck in menial jobs his whole life. Mom dropped out of school as soon as she started to show. She went to live with her aunt until Cindy was born, then moved back in with her parents. My parents got married soon after. Cindy's arrival was believed to be the result of a tragic incident, and out of deep compassion, and maybe love, my dad chose to marry my mom despite everything. My grandparents took care of Cindy while my mom worked. First, she was in a laundry, then as a waitress. Almost 10 years later, I came along. Cindy was a real handful for everyone, for my parents, my grandparents. She was wild, rebellious, and constantly pushing boundaries. Cindy was wild all through high school and even into her first year of college. Then tragedy struck our family again. Cindy got pregnant, contracted AIDS, and was diagnosed with 3 other serious STDs. She passed away before the baby could be delivered. That nearly destroyed my parents. Daddy turned to drinking, and Mom sank into a deep depression. Not long after, there was an accident at my dad's work, and he was killed. The insurance payout and a settlement from the company allowed Mom and me to move far away from Detroit. We relocated to Bastrop, Texas, near Austin, where Mom's sister Carol lived. Aunt Carol had been there for Cindy's birth, and now she became a lifeline for us. I missed my friends from up north, but Bastrop wasn't so bad. The kids were friendly, and I managed to secure a scholarship to Texas State University in San Marcos. Texas State was a great school, and I threw myself into my studies, majoring in mass media communications and advertising. By my junior year, I had a solid plan for my future. That's when I met Ethan Carter. Ethan was a 5th-year senior working on a second major in business management. The way we met was almost comical. We were both rushing to classes in the same building but heading to different ends. As we rounded a corner, we collided. My books scattered everywhere. Ethan apologized profusely, helped me gather my things, and then disappeared down the hall. A few days later, I saw him again in the library. We exchanged polite nods, but something about him made my heart flutter and my stomach twist in a way I couldn't explain. Curious and a little confused, I told my roommate about it. She gave me a knowing look and said, "Rachel, if you want an education, forget about him. But if you're looking for a husband, be careful. I've heard of this guy. Ethan Carter is a 5th-year senior with 2 majors. He's going places, but he doesn't date. He's too busy carrying a full course load, even in the summer." Over the next few weeks, Ethan and I started talking more. Then, one day, he asked me out on a date. I turned him down. I explained, "I really need this degree. I'm on a scholarship, and I can't afford distractions. Meeting at the library or the co-op to study is fine, but anything more than that just isn't possible right now." Ethan seemed to understand. "Maybe after you graduate," he said. "If you're staying in the area, we can see where things go." Graduation day eventually came, and Ethan was there. By then, he had already secured a job with a plastics company in Austin, while I had been recruited by a major advertising firm in South Austin. It felt like the start of something incredible. After that, Ethan swept me off my feet. By September, I had met his parents on their farm, which I absolutely adored. Then, on Thanksgiving Day, Ethan met my mom and Aunt Carol at the farm. With all of us there, he proposed. We were married before Christmas that same year. Thanksgiving became a deeply special day for me, until this year. As we approached our anniversary, someone from my past unexpectedly walked into our office, Ryan Cooper. He was the reason I had thrown myself into my studies after my freshman year. Back then, I had allowed myself to be convinced to go on a date with him, which turned into 3 more. By our 4th outing, I thought he was someone special. I was wrong. Ryan turned out to be a manipulative, self-serving man who pursued women for his own gain, only to discard them when he got what he wanted. Discovering his true nature left me deeply resentful of his arrogance and deceit. So you can imagine my shock when, on November 18th, he approached me tentatively and asked to speak privately. I was immediately wary. I had my friend Lauren stand outside my office door, ready to intervene if I needed her. Rachel Carter, right? He began. It's Rachel Carter now. I snapped. So spill it. Say your piece and leave me alone. He looked genuinely uncomfortable as he replied. Rachel, I'm so sorry for how I treated you. Believe me, it's something I deeply regret. Back then, you were just a prize to me, another number. But I've grown up since then. I want to apologize and hope we can at least not be adversaries. I doubt we could ever be friends, but I've been hoping to see you again so I could try to make things right. I glared at him, unconvinced. Yeah, right. I muttered. No, Rachel, I'm serious. He insisted. You were my last victim, and the one I regret the most. After my junior year, I nearly flunked out and took some time off. I ended up driving a truck for almost 4 years before I realized how much I hated myself for what I'd done to all the women I dated. I went into therapy, got my life together, and eventually went back to school to finish my degree. I've been working in California, but I was recently transferred here. When I saw you, I thought maybe I could apologize and show you I've changed. I'm really happy you found someone. I hope he treats you like the queen you are. That's all I wanted to say. Please forgive me. I didn't even look up from my desk. Instead, I gestured silently for him to leave. The moment the door closed behind him, I broke down in tears. Lauren rushed in, ready to storm after him and kick the scumsucker in the nuts, as she put it. But I stopped her. She was all fired up to march over there and nail the guy where it hurt. I had to stop her and tell her to hold off for a bit. That's when I blurted everything out. I spilled the whole story about him and me. From that point, she and I kept a close watch on him, practically tracking his every move, and we even had some other folks keeping an eye on him too. Our Christmas party was set for the 16th, and by then, it seemed like he was being honest. We shared a few drinks, and he told me I'd chosen a great guy. Then he admitted how much he regretted not being the one I looked at the way I looked at Ethan, with that kind of love and admiration. Somehow, without even realizing it, Ryan started creeping back into my thoughts. He wasn't doing or saying anything specific, but he had this way of just being there. Every day. All day. Then, out of nowhere, it hit me. I still cared about him. It was a strange, almost wrong feeling, but it was the truth. He'd been my first love, and those memories from back then were still so vivid. Ethan, on the other hand, was amazing, kind, gentle, and always knowing just how to care for me. He was everything I could ask for in a partner, but he wasn't my first. Actually, he was my third. After Ryan, I dated someone else, but that relationship ended up being just as shallow, focused only on how I looked. By the time New Year's Eve rolled around, I was a wreck. I couldn't stop thinking about Ryan, and it felt like I was on the verge of destroying my marriage and my life. We were at a fancy hotel banquet hall for the New Year's party, with about 200 people in attendance. Some of our team from California and New York even flew in to join the celebration. It was a big deal. We just secured a massive contract with an international cosmetics and perfume company, and everyone was thrilled. Ethan was off chatting with some of the executives while I spotted Ryan and pulled him aside to a quiet corner. I wanted to have a serious talk about everything going on between us, but before I knew it, things spiraled into something much more heated. The conversation shifted, emotions ran high, and in a moment of passion, I led him into the handicapped bathroom. I was determined to confront whatever tension was hanging between us. Suddenly, it felt like I was 19 again, reliving that intense, familiar connection. It was overwhelming. We did our best to clean up afterward, and Ryan walked out first. As I stepped out, still trying to fix my dress, I ran right into Ethan. Thinking fast, I told him I'd spilled wine on my dress and was trying to clean it before it stained. He nodded and headed to the men's room while I returned to the party. The guilt hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt disgusting, like the worst person in the world, for what I'd just done to Ethan and to us. But Ryan's pull on me was stronger than my love for my husband. That night marked the beginning of the end of our marriage. I never held back in my love or my affection for Ethan. He was my husband, my rock, and the man I thought was my soulmate. But Ryan dominated my thoughts. I kept asking myself, was it just about the sex? Was my love for Ethan real? Or was it Ryan who held my heart all along? I couldn't figure out what was true and what was just a fantasy in my mind. After that night, Ryan and I started meeting up once or twice a week. The sex was incredible, and I felt trapped in the grip of something I couldn't control. We started meeting at motels, but they were getting too expensive, so we switched to using his apartment instead. I couldn't stand that uncomfortable, lumpy bed of his, but occasionally, when Ethan worked late or was out of town, Ryan would come over to my house instead. I hated myself for letting him into our bed, but I couldn't stop. Then, in mid-July, the company rolled out a new non-fraternization policy. It strictly forbade relationships between people in the same division and completely banned any involvement with clients. The new rule terrified me, so I told Ryan we needed to stop seeing each other for a while. He begged me for one last time together, and when Ethan called to say he'd be working late, I gave in and invited Ryan over. That night, when Ethan finally got home, he was too exhausted to do anything. I'd already showered and dressed up in something sexy for him, thinking we could spend some time together. I figured I'd make it up to him the next evening on Thursday. The next day, Ethan got home before I did because I'd stopped by Ryan's apartment for a quick visit. When I arrived, I found him relaxing on the back porch. He'd made tuna salad, my favorite, and suggested I change so we could have dinner on the screened-in porch. I ran upstairs, took a quick shower to freshen up, and came back down wearing shorts and one of Ethan's old t-shirts. Ethan had made me a drink, and we sat side by side, holding hands as we enjoyed the peaceful evening. The view from the porch, overlooking the pool and trees, was calm and soothing. After a while, he handed me another drink, this one a little stronger, and I appreciated it. Then he served dinner on a tray, going out of his way to make the evening feel special. God, the way Ethan cared for me, all the little things he did because he loved me, never failed to amaze me. What I couldn't understand was why he could love someone like me, someone who had been unfaithful. Later that night, Ethan helped me upstairs to bed. He undressed me gently and tucked me in. I was a little drunk, and the weight of my guilt was suffocating. I knew I needed to tell him the truth about everything I'd been doing, but I was terrified. I just hoped he could somehow understand and forgive me for being such a failure as a wife. The next day was a disaster. I woke up with a slight hangover and an overwhelming sense of depression. I knew it was time to end things with Ryan, just like he had once ended things with me. No regrets, just goodbye. That's all I could think as I walked into my office and saw Ryan. I called him in, shut the door, and told him flat out that we were done. I didn't mince words and even told him he should start working on a transfer back to either coast because he couldn't stay here. To my surprise, he told me he'd already put in for a transfer that very morning, saying he missed LA. And then, at 10:15, came the shocker. A gum-chewing college girl with a ponytail strolled into my office and asked for Mrs. Rachel Carter. We get packages and FedEx letters all the time, so I didn't think much of it, until she asked for my ID. Confused, I handed her my driver's license. She gave me a package of papers, said, "You've been served," and walked out like it was nothing. I stared at the envelope in disbelief. Who would be serving me papers? What could this even be about? My hands were shaking as I tore open the envelope and scanned the top sheet. The words hit me like a freight train: petition for divorce, Ethan Carter versus Rachel Carter. I fainted. Lauren walked in right after the girl left, and found me slumped in my chair. She rushed over, panicking, and tried to get me to come around. When I didn't respond, she called for help. One of our runners, who also worked as an EMT, came in just as I was regaining consciousness. She checked me over and said I was physically fine, but inside, I was anything but stable. After everyone left, I handed the papers to Lauren and asked her to read them because I couldn't bring myself to. As she skimmed through, she kept shaking her head in disbelief. "I can't believe Ethan would do this to you," she said. "You two were so in love. You were the perfect couple. Nobody at the agency knew about Ryan and me. We'd kept it completely out of the office, but now it felt like the whole world would find out." The papers said, "Irreconcilable differences." Which made me wonder, did Ethan even know about Ryan? Or was he cheating on me with his PA? She was young, cute, and single, definitely someone Ethan could have been interested in. A part of me hoped that was the case, that he wanted a divorce because he had someone else. Maybe he cheated too. I had to call him and get to the bottom of this. At 10:30, the call I'd been waiting for came. "Hello?" I answered, my voice trembling. "Rachel, what the hell is all this nonsense about a divorce?" Ethan asked, his tone ice cold. "Are you fooling around with that little PA of yours?" I shot back. "Is that why you're doing this? Why would I sign those papers just so you can run off with someone else?" There was a long pause. Then he said, "I know all about Ryan, Rachel." His voice was calm but sharp, like a knife cutting through me. "I've got recordings, phone calls, and videos of you two, both at our house and at his apartment. So if you want to play dirty, I'll make sure your precious Ryan and your company are named in my suit. I suggest you get a lawyer and sign those papers, or things will get ugly." I hung up the phone and broke down in tears. The weight of everything came crashing down on me. Lauren walked in and tried to comfort me, but I couldn't even speak. My morning euphoria had been completely replaced by a numbness that wouldn't go away. By 3 p.m., Andrew, Ryan Ethan's lawyer, called to say he had the signed papers and that I'd hired a lawyer to represent me. He was on his way to the Travis County Courthouse to file everything and set a date to see a judge. Later, Ethan called me. He said I could stay at the house for the weekend, but he wanted me out by the end of the month. If I couldn't find a place by then, he said I could use one of the other bedrooms temporarily. A month later, I moved out, and 2 days after that, we had our first court date. The judge reviewed everything and asked if we were sure this was what we wanted. We both said yes. He granted the petition and explained that the divorce would be final in 6 months, giving us time to reconsider or renegotiate if we wanted to. We both agreed there would be no changes. 6 months later, just after Valentine's Day, our divorce was finalized.